Good day and welcome to the midweek COVID update. So let's see what Wednesday, the 4th of August, let's see where we are with the COVID epidemic in the country. So let me go straight on to our slides. Right. So the curve continues to go downward nationally. So we are now below the peak of the first wave. Some time ago, we were below the peak of the second wave. Not coming down as steeply as we thought it might. There's a bit of flattening here, probably due to what is happening in the Western Cape, that I'll show you just now. So certainly if we look at Gauteng, we are coming down quite well. And I'll come just now to the Gauteng curve itself. Whereas the Western Cape, Cape Town, they really are now in the kind of thick of the epidemic, probably towards the peak. So Gauteng looks good. There we are, probably around about 18, 19 cases per 100,000 population. I do want to stress, however, that we are still very much in the third wave. We haven't come down to a low level yet, so we still need to be cautious. We still need to take the precautions, but we are progressing very well. And there's also reflected in the Hatsola figures, the Hatsola for the home looking after people domestically. These are the active cases coming down quite markedly, and then no real increase in the new cases, down to about 112. These are the weekly figures. Western Cape, Cape Town, not doing as good as we are in Gauteng. So they're really kind of still climbing up, probably going to reach their peak fairly soon. But at the moment, certainly what we hear from our colleagues down in Cape Town, the hospitals are battling at the moment. The hospitals are full, ICU beds are full, and so on. So they are really where we were a few weeks ago. Difficult to see in KZN what the situation is. It's a kind of a funny kind of curve. It is increasing. And is this due to the fact that the services haven't quite returned to normal after the unrest and we're not getting adequate reports? Or is this a genuine, relatively low, 15.3 cases, even lower than where we are in Gauteng at the moment? So I'm not quite sure really how to interpret this, but there it is. Okay, let's go on to the vaccines. A little bit lower than what we were last week. Remember last week, the daily vaccine administration was about 220,000, so it's gone down slightly. But we're now close on 8 million doses have been administered nationally. Divided mainly up into the Pfizer, 6.3 million up to now, and 1.6 million Johnson & Johnson. So how does this look in terms of our vaccine coverage in the country? Fully vaccinated, these are people that have had 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson or 2 doses of Pfizer. That's about 8.0% of the adult population, 5.4% of the total population. Adult population, 18 years and above. Partially vaccinated, who received just 1 dose of the Pfizer, that's just under 12% of the adult population and just under 8% of the total population. And if we look at where we were 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and 1 week ago, we certainly are steadily progressing in terms of total doses for fully vaccinated and percentage coverage, adult population, partially vaccinated, and so on. So there's a steady increase. And in fact, globally, we are, I think, still about 11th or 12th in terms of speed of vaccination. But as I have said in previous occasions, there's quite a leeway that we still need to get to make up for a relatively slow start. All right, let's do some of the questions which have come up. And again, many thanks for the questions which have been sent in. I've had a large number of questions with regard to pregnancy. Is the vaccine safe in pregnancy? And questions related to that. Does the vaccine affect fertility? Is it safe in the early part of pregnancy, in the latter part of pregnancy? Is it safe for vaccines to be administered to nursing mothers? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because it seems to be quite a common question, which has been sent into this forum, as well as I get many questions coming to me as well. With all things really, all interventions, medical interventions, whether vaccines or drugs, it's really a balance of the disease versus the balance of the intervention. In this case, the risks of COVID itself, the infection itself, versus the risk of the vaccine. Clearly, we'd like not to have a vaccine at all, but we can't get rid of the fact that there is a disease. And if we don't have the vaccine, we expose ourselves to the risk of the disease. I've put it more or less equal, but I guess this is really how it should look like. The risk of COVID versus the risk of vaccine. So let's look at the risks of COVID infection itself in pregnancy. Well, first of all, let me deal with fertility. There is no, where this rumor came from, I'm not quite sure, but it has got a bit of widespread coverage in the social media that could the vaccine affect fertility? I want to say right in the beginning, neither COVID nor the vaccine has any effect on fertility. So let's get rid of that. Now let's come back to pregnancy. What are the risks of COVID disease itself in pregnancy? Well, first of all, pregnancy itself, one can understand that there's a bit of immunosuppression, suppression of the immune system. This is understandable because the body doesn't want to reject the growing infant, which is to some extent a foreign protein. So that's the one factor, one theoretical reason why COVID itself might cause more severe disease in pregnancy. Second of all, there's a strain on the lungs, on the pulmonary system, on the heart, because now, because it is handling two individuals, the growing fetus, as well as the pregnant mum. The lung capacity is a little bit compromised with the growing abdominal mass, pushing up the diaphragm. There's increased oxygen requirement for both the mother as well as for the growing fetus. There seems to be an increase in clotting as well. This may be related to when the baby is born to prevent hemorrhage during labor. So these are all theoretical reasons why perhaps COVID itself might cause more severe in pregnancy. Now, what I do want to say is that the majority of pregnant women who get infected with COVID virus tolerate it well. In fact, a large percentage will be asymptomatic. Many will have it mildly. So the severe disease in the obstetrical situation is uncommon. So I just want to give that reassurance to start off with. Nevertheless, it has been shown that when you compare pregnant women to non-pregnant healthy women, matched for age and demographics and race and so on and so forth, there is an increased risk of hospitalization, increased risk of ICU admission. So, for example, 1.5% versus 0.7% pregnancy versus a matched non-pregnant women, the risk of ICU admission, being on ventilators is similar, 0.5% versus 0.3%. Then there also seems to be an increased risk with the variant. That's quite interesting. There's a recent paper which showed the risk, and I'm not quite sure what this percentage refers to, but it just shows the relative from 24.8% with the previous ancestral strain of virus to 35.8% with the alpha virus. This was done in the United Kingdom, up to 45% of the Delta virus. So Delta virus seems to, in fact, cause more problems than the preceding variants of the virus. There's another problem in pregnancy, that there seems to be an increased risk of preterm delivery, pregnant women who are infected with the virus. The fetus, there doesn't seem to be any problems, and this has been studied quite extensively, both in experimental, right the way from experimental animals, right the way from a large database from China and also in the Northern Hemisphere countries. that there does not seem to be any abnormalities, no evidence of abnormalities in the growing infant in pregnant women who are infected with COVID. So to summarize it, there is some significant risk of COVID infection in pregnancy. Not high, and I must stress, but there is a risk, a greater risk of hospitalization, of more severe disease in pregnancy. Now let's look at the risks of being vaccinated, vaccinating pregnant women. Now, theoretically, let's look at it theoretically. We know we don't give live virus vaccine. Viruses are vaccines which are made from the virus which multiplies. Obviously, these viruses are made weaker, but they do multiply in the body. So, for example, we don't give rubella vaccine, obviously. We don't give measles vaccine. Try not to give polio vaccine, the live virus variant of that. Not for any observed or any reported risk, but for theoretical reasons, we don't like giving a live. But killed vaccines are known as vaccines which are made either from the virus which has been inactivated or parts of the virus that we do give in pregnancy. We give, for example, influenza vaccine to pregnant women. We give whooping cough, that's a bacterium, but whooping cough vaccine to pregnant women. And there's been no problem. So theoretically, the COVID vaccine, which is also parts of the virus, should not give any problems in pregnancy either. So let's look at the data. And there have been quite large registers of pregnant women that have been inadvertently vaccinated or actively vaccinated during pregnancy. One of the largest ones comes from the Center for Disease Control in the United States. They've got what's called a V-Safe register, and they have registered so far over 60,000 pregnant women that have been vaccinated with no safety problem at all, no signal of any problem giving the vaccine in pregnancy. The Israeli national rollout, again, several thousand pregnant women were vaccinated, again, no safety signal. And in many other countries as well. So if we look at what the recommendation is from all these international authorities, for the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecology in the United Kingdom, International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics, United States Center for Disease Control, World Health Organization, the South African Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and also our MAC, our Ministerial Advisory Committee. We've advised that pregnant women should consult with their medical attendant who can tell them what the risks are of COVID disease and the theoretical risks of vaccine. If at all possible, vaccination should be maybe delayed till after 14 weeks. But other than that, our recommendation is that pregnant women should be vaccinated. The reason being is that the COVID disease does carry a small risk. The vaccine carries no demonstrable risk at all. So let me now go to some of the other questions. I'll deal with them very briefly. So I did spend a bit of time on pregnancy, but I have had a lot of questions. I thought it deserves a bit of more in-depth discussion. I've had a few questions about booster doses of vaccine. Should one get a booster dose if one has had one dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine or 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine? You might have seen in the media that some countries are offering a third booster dose for those, for example, in Israel, for those who've had 2 doses of Pfizer. This is for the elderly and for people whose immune systems are suppressed from underlying medical conditions. At this stage in this country, we are not recommending a booster dose. We really want to get as many people vaccinated as possible. But in addition, it has been shown, and been for several studies, particularly Professor Glenda Gray down in Cape Town and 1 or 2 other studies, have shown that the immune system does remain fairly robust, fairly good, right up to about 280 days after vaccination. We are still weighing up, should one give a booster dose after that? But at this stage, there hasn't been, and we haven't really kind of got enough data to suggest that a booster dose is necessary. So at this stage, no, a third dose of Pfizer is not necessary. or a second dose after the Johnson & Johnson is not necessary at this stage. And we will come back with an advisory in the future if it does become necessary. Then also I've had a few questions, people who've got underlying illnesses like, for example, diabetes, sugar diabetes. Will the vaccine cause an aggravation of these underlying diseases? And the evidence is no. Obviously, people that are being treated should consult with their doctors, but as a general recommendation, there's no evidence that vaccines will bring on more severe diabetes or any other underlying illness. And people that are on steroids or any other kind of medication can safely be vaccinated. Lastly, I'll just also deal with a question which came up. If you go for your vaccine, you had your first dose, should it be on the same arm or different arm? I think this question arises from when we give doses simultaneously, a vaccine simultaneously. But then we do like giving them on different arms. The reason being is that there are some side effects. I'm going to deal with that side effects and adverse effects next week, but there are some minor side effects which occur, maybe a bit of tenderness or pain in the arm. And for that reason, if you're giving 2 or more vaccines simultaneously, we prefer giving them on different arms. But if you've gone for your first dose and you've had it in your left arm, you can safely have it again 6 weeks later in the same arm, or if you prefer in the other arm. There's no difference really. It makes no difference whatsoever. So thank you very much for listening to our Wednesday, the 4th of August update. And we'll see you next week with a further update, see where the vaccine, where the virus is going, where the epidemic is going next week. Thank you very much. Have a good day.